Can you hear me?
Yes.
Namaskar and good afternoon to all of you. Respected Professor Bhabakumar Sharma sir, respected Dean of School of Basic Sciences, Professor Jayanta Kumar Sharma sir, respected Dr. Gautam Kalita sir, my dear Manjil Soikia, dear faculty colleagues, and my dear participants. On behalf of the Assam Kaziranga University, I, Dr. Dimpaljyoti Mohanta, Head of the Department of Mathematics, Kaziranga University, and coordinator of this webinar, welcome you all to this 3 days international webinar on fundamental mathematics. Before starting this program, I would like to apologize for yesterday's technical fault and thank you the Assam Kaziranga University and Ganeshwara for giving us this opportunity again to conduct this international event. Because of you, we all are going to swim in this beautiful ocean of mathematics for the next 3 days. And obviously, with the guidance of our three beautiful minds, we all will enjoy this journey in another level. As you all know, we have rescheduled our entire session. Yesterday, we are trying to communicate with all the participants. Now, instead of 12 to 14, our new schedule is 13, 14, and 17. We have given a break due to the Independence Day and the Sunday we have. So the program will end at 17. Now, I would like to request the Dean School of Basic Sciences, Professor Jayanta Kumar Sharma sir, to kindly welcome all the participants to this 3 days international webinar on fundamental mathematics. Please, sir. Sir, you are not audible.
I believe I am audible now.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay, thank you, Dimple. Very good afternoon to everyone present here today. Respected Professor Bhabakumar Sharma from IIT Guwahati, Dr. Gautam Kalita from IIIT Guwahati, Dr. Manjil Saikia, Postdoctoral Research Associate in the Cardiff University, UK, respected faculty colleagues who are present here today, and dear students from India and abroad. First of all, on behalf of the organizing committee, I offer you heartiest welcome to this online international webinar on fundamental mathematics. This is indeed not to mention, it's needless to mention that the recent global pandemic due to COVID-19 has taught us many things. COVID-19 has created a truly unprecedented situation which affects us all, including exchange of knowledge. None of us could ever expect such fast changes to occur in education system. In order to keep continuity with the exchange of academic and scientific knowledge during COVID-19 pandemic, the online platform is indeed the best friend to a large extent, I believe. From a mere option, online education has become a mass mode of delivering education. And as I said, it has become a mass mode of delivering online education. The Department of Mathematics in the School of Basic Science, Kaziranga University, in association with Ganeshwara. So I am specially mentioning Ganeshwara and thank them for being with us for conducting this 3 days webinar in our journey of keep continuing with the teaching and learning process and to exchange knowledge among everyone. So with this few note, I believe this 3 days webinar will be enriching to all of you, and you will have good experience, and you all will understand the importance of fundamental mathematics in our life. With these words, once again I welcome all of you to this webinar starting from today, and I hope that you all will be engaged, and the experienced faculty colleagues will be able to hold you during these days in the webinar. Thank you. Dimple, over to you.
Yes, thank you so much, sir, for your beautiful words. Now we have Professor Bhabakumar Sharma, sir. Professor Bhaba sir is a professor of IIT Guwahati. From the last 30 years, sir is actively working to make science and mathematics more popular in various parts of India as well as in abroad. Sir is also an active member of various organizations like MTTS, Assam Academy of Mathematics, Mathematics Education Trust, Mathematics Research Association, AICT, UGC, etc. We are so glad to have you, sir, among us. I also thankful to sir because of giving time today also for this inaugural session. Now I invite Professor Bhavakumar sir to deliver his honorable speech. Please, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Dimple, for your kind words. I'm very glad to be here. So, Professor Jayanta Kumar Sharma, Dean, School of Basic Sciences, Assam Kazima University, Dr. Dimple Jyoti Mohanta and his colleagues, Department of Mathematics and Department of Basic Sciences, Kazima University, Dr. Manjil Saikia, Dr. Gautam Kolita. Dr. Kolita, I suppose he will be the speaker today. So I express my heartiest thanks for your this endeavor, for this support. So I thank the School of Basic Sciences, Assam Kaziranga University, for their efforts to promote science and scientific temperament in not only in the locality, in the area where the university is situated, but across the state and across the country. And today, they have proved that their efforts has gone beyond the country, okay, and international event they are hosting. So definitely I applaud. I also like to appreciate Gonit Sora. So for Gonit Sora, the efforts of Gonit Sora to generate mathematical awareness among the students and teachers, and bringing mathematics and mathematicians to the reach of learners on these online platforms during this very difficult situation of this pandemic times. It's really and very adorable and appreciable efforts. I thank Gonit Sora and Assam Kaziranga University for the efforts of bringing all of us here today. A few words about my understanding of fundamental mathematics. So two basic notions, which are, I feel that they are taboos, is that one is that only brilliant students do mathematics. And other one, because good students come to do mathematics so they can learn on their own. I feel that both are taboos, both are on wrong standpoints. So they are wrong notions. So actually, if you see that not everyone, what we call brilliant, okay? Brilliance, of course, that's a very relative term. But unless someone is very brilliant, so-called brilliant, one should not go for mathematics. It is not brilliance, question of brilliance. It is question of likings. Okay? Liking a subject, liking music. Even someone may not be very good in, performing music, but one can appreciate music, and actually then one can learn. So of his kind of or her kind of music, one can learn. So is mathematics. Okay. Now, there is you see that there is a conspicuous gap. If you see, it is not only in our country, across the globe, there is a conspicuous gap between the school mathematics and college mathematics. Okay, there is a quantum jump. And we feel that because only brilliant students, they go for doing higher mathematics, so they will learn on their own. It's a very wrong concept. There should be some helping hands. Okay? There should be some efforts so that gap is overcome by the students who want to pursue mathematics. Okay? So these fundamental ideas, they should be introduced in such a way that the students can, not only they can learn, okay, that learning should be joyful. Not only that, they should be able to invent, they should be able to discover. Not necessarily it's something new which is not existing. Whatever is existing, there should be some opportunity for the student to discover from small things. So through discovery, they learn how to discover and do more mathematics. Okay. So I think I should not take much. So I'd like to hope, definitely I hope that this series of talks will give the audience joy of learning, some of the beautiful notions of mathematics, fundamental mathematics in the areas of number theory, combinatorics, differential equations. So these are beautiful subjects with beautiful notions and beautiful results and beautiful applications. Okay? So I wish all the best. I thank all the young mathematicians coming forward to deliver talks in this series. Okay? I wish all success. So I thank again the organizers for giving me chance to speak in these few words. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your beautiful words. I also thank sir for giving us your valuable time for the second day too. Thank you so much, sir. Now we have Dr. Manjil Soikia, the Managing Editor of Ganitsara, as well as the Research Associate of Cardiff University, to kindly continue this session from this point. Manjil, please continue.
Thank you, Dr. Mohanto. Before going into the main talk, very briefly, I'd like to say a few words. So first of all, I'd like to thank Kaziranga University, especially the Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor P.K. Mishra, the Dean of Basic Sciences, Professor Jayanta Sharma, who is with us today, and the School of Basic Sciences family, especially Dr. Dimple Mohanto, who has been working tirelessly behind the scenes for making this program a success. I also thank Professor Bhava Sharma, who has kindly given us his time, not only yesterday, but also today, and for his motivating and kind words. I also thank the speaker, Dr. Gautam Kolita, who is again with us today as well, so for giving his valuable time again for the benefit of the participants. Before I go to the introduction and the talk, so let me just mention that if there are any questions during the talk, please use the chat option and send us the question, and at the end of the talk, we'll forward it to the speaker. So please do not overload the chat with unnecessary messages, because then it is easy for the genuine questions to get lost. So please only ask questions and not use the chat for unnecessary messages. Thank you. So let me just introduce Dr. Gautam Kolita. Dr. Kolita is now an assistant professor in IIIT Guwahati. He did his BSc from Bozali College, and then he went to Tezpur University to do his MSc, where he also did his PhD, and he completed his PhD in 2014. Dr. Kolita's research work is broadly in the areas of number theory, algebra, and cryptography. And today he's going to speak about number theory in cryptography. So welcome, Dr. Kolita. Please take us from
there. Thank you, Manjil, for the kind words. And congratulations to Assam Kaziranga University, all the family of Assam Kaziranga University and Ganitsara for holding this webinar. And thank you, Bhava Kumar Sharma sir, for led this occasion. So I'll just today talk about a fundamental topic of mathematics, which is basically number theory, and just talk about some applications of number theory in cryptography systems. And most of us actually gone through most of the cryptography system without knowing. So in this talk, I'll try to just explain how these different crypto systems are actually using in our day-to-day life, even wondering about them. And the number theory, those are used in those crypto systems. And if I need to talk whatever number theory, we are actually doing number theory from our class 1. Whatever we are doing, most of the things are based on number theory. But even though we do not bother whether those are number theory, but later on when we go to specialization in our graduation, then only know that these are the mathematics that we studied, and we go into more detail about those topics. So the overview of my talk would be basically, let's start with what is number theory, why those are important, what is cryptography, what are the tools those are used, what are the tools of number theory those are used in cryptography, why cryptography is important for us. Then the number theoretical tool, those are used for certain particular cryptography systems. And actually, there are many crypto systems which are in our day-to-day life, but it is not possible to discuss about all the cryptography systems and all mathematical tools those are used in those crypto systems. I'll just talk about certain topics which are used in certain cryptography systems. And then I'll just try to demonstrate how those number theoretical tools are used in the two different kind of crypto system called private key crypto systems and public key crypto systems, with examples of certain particular affine cipher, Hill cipher, RSA crypto system, and Algol crypto systems, where different number theoretical tools are used in those crypto systems. And I'll try to explain or try to mention certain attacks used on those crypto systems and discuss about their security as well. So before going to the main crypto systems and cryptography, let me tell what this number theory is. And we already know number theory is a part of mathematics, is a branch of mathematics. So the mathematics is so much important that Galileo stated that mathematics is the language with which God has written the universe. That means we can understand how much important the mathematics is for our day-to-day life if God has used it for creating the universe. And most of us knew Galileo. Galileo is the great mathematician, philosopher, astronomer, physicist. So he studied that all physical phenomenon available in our surrounding can be expressed in type of mathematical language, right? And according to Gauss, the one of the branches of mathematics, which is number theory, is more important comparative to other mathematical, other branches of mathematics. That's why he stated that mathematics is the queen of sciences and number theory is the queen of mathematics. Right? So there are many branches of mathematics which have many practical applications, but number theory is the most important part of mathematics in terms of nowadays, in terms of application, as well as it's because of its purity as well. Now, if I need to tell what is number theory is in simple language, number theory is actually a branch of mathematics which is used to study the natural numbers. Natural numbers 1, 2, 3, or sometimes 0 is also included in the natural numbers. Or we can extend it to the study of integers. This is basically the ancient idea of number theory. That number theory basically deals with the integers. But the modern number theory is not restricted to the set of integers. It basically deals with those sets, most of the sets which are actually have properties similar to the integers. So that's why the set of rational numbers, set of real numbers, and set of complex numbers also comes into play in number theory in certain cases. Basically, the results of number theory can be proved easily. Sometimes the results of number theory can be proved easily for the integers by extending those to some complex numbers or real numbers or rational numbers. But in this talk, I'll not talk about the other sets which are used in number theory, but I'll basically restrict myself to the study of integers because most of the crypto systems use the integers only because of their bit representations, finite bit representations. So what is the importance of this number theory is? Number theory is if somebody says before 1950, somebody asked this question before 1950 or around that, it can be seen that number theory has not seen as a so much practicable mathematics. So it was considered as the purest of mathematics without much of application. And that's why Dixon says that, thank God, the number theory is unsolved by an application. That means it is not made any, it is not used for application. Nobody is thinking about application part, keep on studying the mathematics. So that is its beauty. And then G.H. Hardy stated that real mathematics has no effect on war. And no one has yet discovered any war-like situation to be solved by the theory of numbers. And G.H. Hardy is a Persian, was advisor of Ramanujan at Cambridge when Ramanujan visited Cambridge. And G.H. Hardy is a Persian of World War I, so that's why he has seen a lot of destruction to the world with the help of the invention or discoveries of sciences. But he has not seen any application of number theory in those ways. But the scenario has changed a lot now. The number theory is no more a purest branch of mathematics, but it has more application nowadays. And the number theory can make a war-like situation, which is more dangerous nowadays because of the cybercrime. The cybercrimes basically happens with the knowledge of number theory, which are used by computer sciences. And for computer scientists, the number theory becomes the most important tool. And it is used for different areas of computer science called algorithm, artificial intelligence, and cryptography, which is the most important, which is demanding topics of computer science. So I'll not discuss about the algorithm and artificial intelligence part in this talk, but I'll just mention about, or I'll just talk about the cryptography part here. So if I need to go to cryptography, what do you mean by cryptography? So cryptography is actually a branch of cryptology, which actually studies the methods of sending messages or some information via insecure channel. Insecure channel means it may be a internet, it may be a telephone, right? So this telephone or internet are not considered as a secure channel, but these are insecure channel. That means some advisory can attack on this and get information through this internet or insecure channel. Right? So the cryptography basically deals with sending important messages through insecure channel in a particular form. Particular form means in encrypted form or disguised form. It means it is not the original message, but in a different form of the original message, which is sent through the insecure channel, so that the recipient who is supposed to get the message can get it and obtain the original message, but no one else or the attacker cannot get the information. But remember that the cryptography is one of the branches of cryptology. Then there is another branch of cryptology which is called cryptoanalysis. And the cryptoanalysis always deals with the methods to crack a crypto system. That means cryptography and cryptology, cryptoanalysis are quite different, are completely different branches of cryptology. One discuss about the security, another try to break the security. That means cryptoanalysis is used to check the security of a crypto system. Right? Until a cryptoanalysis is used to crack a crypto system, it is considered as a secure crypto system. Okay? So therefore, cryptography is actually a science of accessing information. And there are two aspects mainly. One is privacy. Privacy means that I want to share the information with whom. They only can get the information. And authentication, that means who is going to send the message. That means from the aspect of sender and from the aspect of receiver, the secrecy should be maintained in cryptography. The basic setup of a crypto system is like this diagram. If Alice is a sender who supposed to send a message X, and Bob is the receiver who's supposed to get the message, and Oscar is an attacker or advisory who's supposed to get the message, even though he's not supposed to get it. Right? That means Alice do not want that Oscar get the message, but Oscar's try to steal the message somehow through the insecure channel. So in this system, Alice send a message X by encrypting it. That means X is the original message, but he will use a function called encryption function to get another form of that message, that is Y, which is encrypted text or ciphertext, and that Y is sent to the insecure channel. Then Bob will receive the Y, that means encrypted or ciphertext, and use the decryption function. Decryption function is actually, in some sense, the inverse of the encryption function to get the original message. Okay, so if Oscar get the Y, somehow suppose Oscar gets Y, the ciphertext, and if he does not know the decryption function, then he will not get able to get the original message. Okay. So, and in this process, there is one important part, that is the key, right? So the key plays the main role. So key is something which is basically agreed upon by the sender and recipient in advance. They are agreed with some kind of number or something that on which they are supposed to be agreed. Okay? And the key sometimes is sent through a secure channel, okay, and sometimes it is this also can be sent through an insecure channel. So if it is sent through a secure channel, then we call it public key, private key crypto system. And if it is not sent through a secure channel, it is called basically a public key system. I'll just discuss that later on one by one. Okay, so now what do you mean by encryption function? Encryption function is a one-one function from the set of all possible plain text messages. I can consider the plain text messages as A, B, C, D. These are the plain text message units in single digits. Or if it is 2-digit, then AB, AC, these blocks will be the plain text messaging in digraph, and so on, basically. And ciphertext means the numbering that we do. Like if I want to give a number A to 1, that means 1 is the, I can say it is a ciphertext. 1, 2, 3, those are the ciphertext I can consider. So this function f will take a 1, 1 is a bijection function from the set of plain text to the ciphertext. Okay, and the deciphering function is nothing but the inverse of that enciphering function. So there is a direct relation of this enciphering with the deciphering function most of the cases, and sometimes this is not possible to get the deciphering function directly from the enciphering function. So we'll talk about them later on. But before using any crypto system, the first thing is to level the plain texts. These levels are given like 1, 2, 3, so on. Or if it is digraph, it is given 1 to up to 728 or 729 if 0 is not considered, and if 0 is considered, 0 to 728. So suppose if I want to send through a digraph, suppose AB, and if I name A to be 1 and B to be 2, then the leveling of AB, the digraph, would be 27 into 1 plus 2. That means that would be 29. 29 is the leveling of the digraph AB, and so on. Others also can be done. So in general, if one wants to work with k letters block with n letter alphabet, then the numbering will be from 0 to n power k minus 1, this leveling. So these are, and sometimes we generally use objects like vectors, points, matrices to level plain texts as well. Now, why this cryptography is important? And remember, the cryptography is actually based on the principle, which is a Kirchhoff's principle, which says that the crypto system should be secure even if the attacker knows all the details about the crypto system, with the exception of the secret key. That means the crypto system, when a crypto system is used, one's supposed to know all the details of the crypto system, like what kind of system, like what kind of, whether it is a single message letters are used, or digraphs are used, or matrices or the vectors are used. Even if a person knows all these things, without knowing the secret key, one should not able to get the messages that are sent through so insecure channel using the crypto system. Okay, and the crypto systems are, or cryptography was in ancient time was used basically for military and diplomatic purposes in warlike situation to send secret messages. Okay, but nowadays it is not like that. With the use of internet, so much internet and internet banking, online shopping, use of WhatsApp, Facebook, the cryptography or crypto systems becomes a important part of our life without knowing. Okay, so if you look at the WhatsApp that we use, in WhatsApp it is already written that calls and videos are encrypted so that nobody can get the message. And even nowadays there is a advertisement of WhatsApp that your messages are 100% encrypted, right? So this encryption are generally used using the cryptography or crypto systems, and without knowing those, we basically using them. We do not bother about those crypto systems which are used in our day-to-day life, whether in our messaging or in our online shoppings, when we give our bank details, all these things. Okay, and all this crypto system, not all, basically most of the crypto systems that are in use nowadays generally uses number theory. Okay, so I'll just discuss about those certain number theory tools which are used in certain particular cryptography crypto systems. So the number theory, if I need to start with the number theory actually starts with the Euclid's algorithm, right? So I'll talk about them, but before that, let me think a problem where the crypto system can be used. So suppose I want to send or a merchant or a bank wants to know my credit card. I have a credit card and I want to send the detail of the credit card to a bank, right? Through an insecure channel, maybe a telephone or maybe internet, through internet I want to send. So that another person cannot get the information or my credit card number, right? So if I send the original number, credit card number through the internet, then there's always a possibility that a third person or an attacker or advisor always has a possibility to get that entire credit card number and can use it for his interest, right? So therefore, we need to send the message in such a way, even though attacker get the message, should not get the credit card number. But the merchant or the bank should able to crack the original credit card number with the help of a ciphering message. Okay, so this can be given by the merchant. The merchant may tell you that just use this technique, or may suggest you some technique to send that message or credit card number through a ciphering, through using some technique to send the original credit card number to some other number. And these are actually used using two kinds of crypto system. One is private key crypto system, which is also called symmetric crypto system. Another is called public key crypto system, which is called asymmetric crypto system. Why the private key crypto system is called symmetry? Because if one knows the enciphering function, the app that we define, then he or she can directly obtain the deciphering function as well directly. But in public key crypto system, even if one knows the enciphering key, will not able to, or enciphering function, he or she will not able to get the deciphering function without having much knowledge about the whole system. Okay. So in public key crypto system, there are two kinds of keys are used. One is private key private key, another is public key. But in private key crypto system, there is only one kind of key is used, that is private key. Okay. And all the in this both the crypto system, the properties of integers, congruences, and different numerical aspects like quadratic residues, properties of integer, their extension, group structure, field structure, these are already used in cryptography. So before going to this two crypto systems one by one, I'll just deal with the basic number theory things or fundamental number theory. Those are used in those crypto systems. And the number theory that, or the number theory that I will discuss here, maybe in an abstract way, but most of us already know about this all number theory. Right? I begin with the division algorithm, based on which the whole number theory actually develops. Right? So the division algorithm is already known to all of us. We used in class 3 or 4. But it states for any integer a and b, if b is not equal to 0, then there exist two numbers, quotient and remainder, q and r respectively, such that a is equal to bq plus r, where r can be 0 or it is less than mod of b. I've given the mod because I'm allowing b to be a negative integer as well. Right? And if I do not allow b to be a negative integer, I can remove this mod part as well. So here a is dividend, b is divisor, q is quotient, and r is called the remainder. And if r is equal to 0, then we can write a is equal to bq. And in that case, we say that a is divided by b, or b is a divisor of a. But if r is not equal to 0, then a will not be divisible by b. Right? There is certain remainder will be there. And one can directly verify that the divisibility is an equivalence relation. That means it is reflexive, symmetric, and transitive as well. Right? And it has many other properties as well. That means if a divides b and a divides c, then a divides the linear combination of b and c, which is actually used a lot in proving many properties of the integers. Okay. Okay. And the division algorithm is used to prove many properties of integers. Like I've given examples like 3a square minus 1 is never a perfect square. Right? And this can be used that if one has to be a perfect square, it has to be one of the form θk plus 1. Right? But if you write 3a square 3k or 3k plus 1, but you cannot write 3a square minus 1 in the form θk plus 1 or θk. It will be of the form θk plus 2. So any number of the form θk plus 2 can never be a perfect square, which can be proved using the division algorithm. Similarly, the sequence 11, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, and so on, this sequence will also not have any perfect square, because the numbers will be of the form 4k plus 3, all numbers, because 11 is 4 into 2 plus 3, 111 is 4 4 into 27 plus 3, and so on. So all numbers are of the form 4k plus 3, and there is no integers of the form 4k plus 3 which are perfect square. So these are certain simple applications of the division algorithm. And division algorithm is also used to find the GCD, the greatest common divisor. So greatest common divisor means it is the largest divisor of any two integers. Generally, without loss of generality, we can consider that a and b are two positive integers as well. So the largest common divisors of a and b is called the GCD. We generally found the GCDs using the factorization, but for the factorization, generally for larger number, it's not so easy to do factorization, but we use the division algorithm to find the greatest common divisor of any integers, right? Because it is basically takes less time comparative to the factorization for a large number. Even though in our primary or high school, we use the factorization techniques for smaller integers. Okay. And the most important property of the greatest common divisors is that if I have two numbers a and b, their greatest common divisor GCD of AB always can be expressed as a linear combination of these two numbers a and b. Okay, and because of this, the GCDs are used to solve Diophantine equation. That means equations in the set of integers, or even these are used in cryptographic systems as well. Okay, but this statement, the theorem, is not a if and only if condition. That means the GCD can be expressed as a linear combination of a and b, but if any number linear combination of a and b may not be a GCD, but it can be a multiple of the GCD. Okay, so these are the properties actually that GCD has, even though there are many properties, but I'm stating those properties which can be used. So this theorem one is basically used in most of the crypto system which uses number theory. Okay, and if we use the division algorithm repeatedly, we can find the GCD, which is called Euclidean algorithm, and the GCD also can be expressed in terms of the number a and b using this Euclidean algorithm. So what is this Euclidean algorithm is? Suppose you need to find the GCD of any two numbers a and b. Then I can use the GCD, I can use the division algorithm where a will be divided by b, which becomes a is equal to b q1 plus r1. Then if r1 is 0, then automatically I can read the GCD. The GCD of a and b would be b. But if r1 is not equal to 0, then I can divide this b again by r1. And then I get a remainder r2, right? And this process, until I get a 0 remainder, I can continue, right? And it is bounded, I'll get a 0 remainder. Because if you look at the sequence of the remainders, like r1, r2, r3, up to rn, this is a decreasing sequence of integers, right? And this is always smaller than b. So there are always finitely many numbers smaller than b, or finitely many positive integers smaller than b. So there is always a bound that the 0 remainder always appears at some time. Okay. So in this, if you use the division algorithm repeatedly, which is called Euclidean algorithm, then the last non-zero remainder r1 is the GCD of this a and b, because of the lemma which states that if a is equal to bq plus r, then GCD of ab is same as GCD of b and r. So from the last statement, I can say that rn is the GCD of rn minus 1 and rn, right? And that GCD will be same as GCD of rn minus 2 and rn minus 2. And if I go backward, I'll see that this will be same as the GCD of a and b. So that means the last non-zero remainder rn is actually the GCD of a and b. And the same division algorithm or Euclidean algorithm can be used to find the number rn as a linear combination of a and b. Okay, so how this can be done? Just simply is just looking at rn. From the last statement, if I do, rn can be expressed as rn minus 1 minus rn minus 2 qn, right? Then I replace this rn minus n again from the previous line again. That will become rn minus 3 minus rn minus 2 qn minus 1, and so on until I get a and b. I can keep on replacing one by one the remainders, and finally I'll get the GCD of a and b as a linear combination of a and b. So I've given an example here where I have taken two large number 1, 2, 3, 7, 8 and 3, 0, 5, 4. This also can be done using factorization, but factorization may not be so suitable because it may take more time to find a factorization. Okay, and in number theory, we assume that the factorization law is impossible or is not feasible for a large number, sufficiently large number. So if I use the divisional here, I get 6 equations, and from the 6th equation, I see that 6 is the last non-zero remainder. So 6 is a GCD of these two numbers, and the 6 can be expressed as a linear combination of 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, and 3, 0, 5, 4. In this way, by replacing, just you look at 6 can be represented in 24 minus 18. Then this 18 will be replaced from this 138 minus 5 into 24. Okay, which is simplified to get 6 into 24 minus 138. Then 24 will be replaced, 6 into 162 minus 138, and so on I can do to get the linear combination. So that's how this GCD can be expressed as a linear combination of those two numbers using the Euclidean algorithm. Okay. So the next thing that we need in cryptography is a number theory. This is the most important part in any cryptographic systems. The number theory plays the primary role in any crypto system which uses number theory. Okay, so the number theory, the prime numbers, we already know these are actually numbers which do not have any proper divisors. The only divisors are plus minus 1 and plus minus p. And remember that 1 is neither considered as a prime number nor considered as a composite number. So that's why I've taken p is bigger than 1. Okay, so any number which is not prime is also called composite. Right? And the prime numbers are very interesting. Why these are interesting? Because smaller numbers, it's quite easy to check the primality or whether a number is a prime or not by checking the divisors. Suppose n is a number, we check the divisors up to root n. If there is a divisor up to root n, then we can say that it is a composite, otherwise it is not prime, otherwise it is prime. But if it is a large number, if I take a 16-digit number, we generally use as computers, used by computers, it is not be easy to get check the all divisibility. It is always time consuming. It takes a lot of time to check that. So therefore the primality is always a concern, right? So therefore it is always a problem whether one can give a feasible way to find whether a number is a prime or not. Okay, and even if it is prime, even if it is not a prime, the factorization is again more difficult comparative to that. Okay. That's what generally it is assumed by, has been proved generally. In computer also, bigger number, checking primality is always a problem. And even it is known that it is not a prime, the factorization is again is more difficult. Okay? So therefore, it allows us to use prime numbers in cryptography because of these two facts. But there are certain probabilistic methods using the Euler's theorem or Rowe's method. There are many methods. Algorithmic method to check the primality, but these methods cannot guarantee. These are some probability. That means it will give a probability that what is the probability that number cannot be prime, or what is the probability that number can be a prime. And these are actually enough for computer scientists to use them in cryptography. Okay, so I'm not dealing with those primality testing methods or factorization methods as well. There are many factorization methods like Fermat's factorization and container fraction factorization methods. There are many methods that are used, but for bigger number, these also fails to implement using computers. Okay. So the prime numbers actually plays the role of building blocks for all natural numbers. Why? Because of the fundamental theorem of arithmetic, which says that any positive integer can be expressed as a product of prime powers. And this representation is always unique except the order of the prime factors. Okay? And this already we know that when I find a GCD, we always try to find the factorization of any number and then try to find the common numbers. And this is because the fundamental theorem of arithmetic. But even though the fundamental theorem of arithmetic is there theoretically, but it is not easy to factorize, right? So it may take very long time to factorize a large integer. Right? So it is easier for a smaller number, but for a bigger number, the factorization not actually computationally feasible in computer. Okay. But there are some applications of fundamental theorem of arithmetic. One is in the Euler phi function. Euler phi function is also used in crypto system. So Euler phi function is basically counts the number of co-prime numbers to n. If I need to check n is any number, and if I need to find a number of co-prime numbers less than n, then phi n will give you the number of co-prime numbers, positive co-prime numbers, obviously. And the formula for phi n or Euler phi function for any integer is 1 if n is 1, and it is n minus 1 if n is a prime, because all numbers smaller than a prime are co-prime to n. And if n is composite, then we can use the fundamental theorem of arithmetic to factorize it, and then this formula will give you the number of co-prime numbers to n. Okay, and note that 3000 is a composite number. Obviously, this is the factorization, and then using this formula, I can say that there are 800 co-prime numbers less than 3000. Okay, and moreover, defect prime number factorization can be used to find the number of divisors, where tau is the number of divisors of 3000. It can be seen that there are 32 divisors of 3000, and this one will give you the sum of all divisors. That means the sum of these 32 divisors is 9360. So these are the general formula for the divisor function and sum of divisor functions. Even though we are not using the divisor function and sum of the divisor function in our cryptography system, but we will use a Euler function for our cryptographic use. So then the most one of the important topics of number theory which are used in cryptographic system is the congruences. So we have discussed two already. One is the division algorithm and GCD, another is the prime number, and third is the congruences. So the congruences are generally introduced by Gauss in his famous book in first chapter itself. But it says that if n is any positive integer, two numbers or in two integers a and b are said to be congruent to each other in modulo n, congruence modulo n, if the difference of a and b, that means a minus b or b minus a, is divisible by n. Okay, and from here you can see that using division algorithm, if I write a is equal to n cube plus r, then a would be congruent to r mod n, as well as a is congruent to r mod q. For example, if you take 10 and suppose 15, then 10 is congruent to 15 mod 5, because 10 minus 15 is minus 5, which is divisible by 5. Similarly, if you take 17 and 3, 17 and 3 is congruence modulo 7, because 17 minus 3 is 14, so 14 is divisible by 7. Okay, so that's how the congruence comes into play. And there are many applications of this, or many properties of the congruences are the basic, or I can say, congruence properties form an equivalence relation, right? So it is reflexive, symmetric, and what I can say is transitive as well. And therefore they form a partition from the set of natural numbers, the residue classes, or I can say equivalent classes 0, 1, 2, n minus 1. So zero equivalence class means it is the set of all numbers which will give remainder 0 when is divided by n. Equivalence class 1 means the set of all integers which will give you remainder 1 when divided by n, and so on, right? And if I consider a set of all remainders 0 up to n minus 1, which is denoted by Zn, right? This is the set of all least non-negative residues modulo n. This is called complete set of residues, and one can check that Zn is a group with respect to addition modulo n. Okay, and Zn is a group with respect to multiplication modulo n if we remove the 0 and n is considered to be a prime number. Okay, then it becomes a group with respect to multiplication as well, because all elements of Zn will not have multiplicative inverse. The elements which will be co-prime to n will have only multiplicative inverse, and it is one of the basic properties of the definition of group. Okay, so the elements which are co-prime to n will have only inverses in modulo n, multiplicative inverse in modulo n. But with respect to addition, all will have inverse. A will have the inverse n minus a. So thus there are phi n multiplicative elements which will have inverse. That means phi n units in Zn. So you can see that 7, has an inverse in modulo 9, which is 4, because GCD of 7 and 9 is 1, and I can write 7 into 4 plus 9 into minus 3 is 1. If I take modulo 9, ultimately it becomes 7 into 4 is congruent to 1. So 4 will be inverse of 7, and 7 is also inverse 4. But 3 and 6 will not have any inverse in modulo 9, because 3 and 6 are not co-prime to 9. Okay, but if P is prime, all elements will have inverse modulo n, because all elements smaller than P will be co-prime to P. So this logic can be used in proving the Euler's theorem as well. What Euler's theorem states that if A and n are two co-prime numbers, their GCD is 1, then A power phi n is always congruent to 1 mod n. Okay, so that means A power phi n, that means in 3000 I found phi 30, right? So phi 30 is 848, I guess. So then A power, if you take any A, which is co-prime to 3000, right? If you take any A co-prime to 3000, and if you take the power 848, then it will always give you congruence 1 mod 3000 by the Euler's theorem. Okay, so if n is a prime number, then phi p is always p minus 1. Then Euler's theorem gives us a corollary which give it a Fermat's little theorem, which says that A power p minus 1 is congruent to 1 mod p always, where p does not divide A. Because if p does not divide A, ultimately p and A become co-prime. Okay, so that means for any number, if you take any integer, there is always a number which will give you congruence to 1 mod that number, right? And this idea, or the theorem of Euler's and Fermat's little theorem, motivates wants to define the primitive elements of any integer, right? So now what do you mean by primitive elements? Before getting to the primitive elements, we need to know the order of an element. So what do you mean by an order of an integer in modulo n? So if n is any positive integer and A is any number co-prime to n, then the order of A modulo n is the smallest positive integer k, such that A power k is congruent to 1 mod n. Okay, so that means suppose I am taking A is equal to 2 and n is equal to suppose 7, right? So I'll keep on taking the power of 2. First one is 2 power 1, then 2 power 2, 4. 4 is not congruent to 1 mod 7. But when I take 2 cube, k is equal to 3, that is 2 cube is congruent to 2 cube is 8, 8 is congruent to 1 mod 7, right? So that means 3 is the order of 2 mod 7. But there are more numbers, but 3 is the smallest number. If you take 6 power, that is also 1. 9 power is also 1. But 3 is the least positive integer, which will give you congruence 1 mod 7 to 2. Right? So for any prime, the elements of ZP star, that means all non-zero elements having the order p minus 1, because all elements may not have order p minus 1. So if you see the Euler's theorem or Fermat's little theorem, A power p minus 1 or A power phi n is always congruent to 1, right? But phi A p minus 1 may not be the smallest integer. There may be some smaller number than p minus 1, which may be congruent to 1 mod p. Right? That may be the possibility that it can happen. Like in this example that I have taken, n is equal to 7, right? N is equal to 7, which is a prime, so p minus 1 is 6. So that means 2 power 6 is congruent to 1, but 6 is not the least number which is congruent to 1 mod 7, right? So in that way, it may not be possible. There may be smaller number to p minus 1, which will give you congruence to 1. So therefore, all elements of ZP star may not have order p minus 1. But those elements which will have order p minus 1 are called primitive elements or primitive roots of ZP or generator of ZP star, because ZP star is a multiplied group modulo p. I'm not discussing about what its group is. We'll not bother about that here mainly. So if Z is a primitive element of ZP, then if you take all the possible powers, right? Z power 0, Z power 1, Z power 2, so on up to infinity, then it will give you ZP star, right? And if you look at, I have written up to G power P minus 2, because if you write the next term, Z P minus 1, which will be congruent to 1 mod P, right, by the Fermat's little theorem. So ultimately the same thing will repeat after that. So even if you can take power up to infinity, since Z is a primitive root, after certain term, the same thing will repeat. So that means you will get the, say, ZP star, which is a finite set actually with p minus 1 elements. And one can see that there are 5 power 5 p minus 1 primitive elements in ZP. And it is not quite difficult for a smaller number, 29. If I take Z 29, it is easy to check the 2, 3, 8, 12 up to 27. These 12 are the primitive roots. Okay, so these all elements have order 28. Right? But others, if you take 1 has order 1. If you take 4, that will have order less than 28. Okay, maybe 14, I guess. So that's how other elements will not have order p minus 1, that means 28, but these elements will order 28. And these are 12 such numbers. Okay, so these are the basic mathematics that we use or we need to discuss certain cryptographic system. Please note, what the thing that we have discussed is Euclidean algorithm, GCD, prime numbers, right? Congruences, Euler's theorem, and primitive roots. These are the 6 main topics or main tools that we use or that will be used in the cryptographic systems that we'll discuss in this talk. Okay, so now let me discuss about some private key crypto systems or symmetric crypto system. So the most oldest method, and actually before using these crypto systems, there's one story that before the crypto systems, the kings supposed to send some secret messages during wars. What they did, they basically saved certain messenger, their hairs, and write the message on their head and wait till their hairs grow. And then the messenger is sent to the other king or to send a message. If somebody catches that messenger, he will check everything, but it is possible that the attacker will not check his head because hairs are already there, right? But other person who already know that the king will send in that way the message will save the messenger again and look at the message, right? But if this technique is known to someone else, then the same process cannot be used to send it messages, right? So that's why the ancient king also used crypto systems some way. But in modern way, number theory is used, like the one of the method is used by Julius Caesar, which is basically shift messages by some letters. Like A is replaced by D, B is replaced by E, C is replaced by F, and similarly Z will be replaced by C. That means 3 letters shifted to right. And in that way, doodle will encrypt it, because by this function f of x is equal to x plus b, the message doodle, if somebody wants to send a message doodle, he will send GRRGOH, right? And if somebody gets the message GRRGOH, since the function is f is x plus b, the inverse function would be f inverse x, x minus b. That means once getting that message, encrypted message, the recipient will just shift the letters, 3 letters left, right? Then automatically will get doodle. So similarly, one can check there, if one gets the encrypted message XKFJXI, he will shift the message 3 letters left and ultimately get the message animal, which is the original message one's supposed to get. But the defect here is, there are some defects of this method, is that if somebody knows the encryption process, that means if knows f, x is equal to x plus b, like in the problem of the credit card that I started with, suppose the merchant tells me that please encrypt the credit card number using this crypto system. Okay, then what I can do, I can encrypt, I can send a message. But if I already know the function as f, right? So if I get some encrypted credit card number of someone else, I can use the function to get the inverse and get the original credit card number for others as well, right? So that means getting the function f actually can get the original message from the encryption function as well. Okay, the sender and receiver both will know the encryption function and the decryption function in this kind of system. Next, drawback is that if one knows the exact shift amount, right? And even if the function is not known, still one can attack. Why? Because in letters, how many letters are there? 26 letters, right? So how many ways I can shift? At most 26 ways, right? After 26, if I write 27, which is same as shifting 1. Correct? If I shift the letter A up to 27, which is B, and if I shift 1, that is also B. So since there are only 26 possibilities, the search space is very small. So computer can always use it to crack the function. Okay, that is the second drawback. And third drawback is that in language, actually what happens, there is a statistical survey or statistical interpretation of letters, which are used frequently. That means in English language, it has been proved that certain letters appear more frequently, like T is used most frequently. Then E is a second frequent letter in English language. So if one gets a longer message, cipher message, if I can get a cipher message, right? I'm an attacker, suppose. I get a longer message and I'll see what are the letters that are awkward more frequently in that long message. So whatever long message that will appear, I can assume that letter will correspond to T. And the next second frequently number will correspond to E. Okay, so the language analysis will tell me the two shiftings always. So once I know two shiftings, ultimately there is only one unknown B. So since there is only one unknown B, two equations are more than enough to get this B key. Their key is actually B is the key, which is unknown. Okay. So to overcome the second one, the search space 26, there is a more generalization that is done, which is called affine cipher, which is AX plus B. So AX plus B, there is a scaling is also used. Here one can see that the N has to be co-prime to A. If A is not co-prime, the deciphering function will not exist. What is the deciphering function here? One can assume is that A inverse X minus B, right? Because Y is equal to X plus B, then X will be A inverse Y minus B. And this A inverse in modulo N will exist only if A is co-prime to N, right? So that's why this GCD will come into play. And there are how many? There are basically phi n into n such cipher functions will be there. So that means it will increase the size of such space. But even though it is done, I can check this, that I have given an example as well here with this. But even though the first and third drawback of Caesar cipher is still there. Okay, that means knowing the encryption function will allow to decrypt a function. And the frequency analysis statistical letters will tell you there are two unknowns A and B, which are keys of this affine cipher. And if I do two equations, I'll explain in the next slide. Basically, I can get it. But it says, suppose in 26 letters, suppose most frequently occurred letter in ciphertext is K. I have corrected a message. Suppose I have got a message, ciphertext, long ciphertext, and I have seen that K appears most frequently, and the second most is D. And since already linguist researcher has found that E is the most frequently appeared letter in English and T is the next. So one can assume that the K actually correspond E and T correspond D. So from this affine cipher, I can get an equation 11A plus B is congruent to 5 mod 26 and 4A plus B should be congruent to 20 mod 26, where A and B are unknown still to me. The keys are only known to sender and receiver, but I am a taker. I don't know anything, but I have got the ciphertext. Now from these two equations, I can, if I subtract, ultimately I'll get 7 is congruent to 11 mod 26. And from here, one can easily use that 7 and 26 are co-prime. And therefore one can use the Euclidean algorithm to get the GCD and express the GCD as a linear combination to get the inverse function. Okay, and it can be seen that 7 inverse is actually 15 in mod 26. So if I know 7 inverse is 15, so ultimately A would be equal to 9 and B will be equal to 18. So that means with the help of ciphertext, without knowing the keys, I can get or crack the crypto system in this way. Okay, so now if you look at these two crypto systems, there's always drawback, right? But there's one way, the single letters, the third drawback that we say is the what we say is the statistical analysis, right? The frequency statistics of letter. This can be actually removed by doing digraphs, cryptosystems, trigraph, or using 50 block cryptosystems. But the problem in those is that more the size of the blocks, for computers it may not be so easy for computation. So one needs to be careful what should be the size of the blocks so that the computer takes less time to execute it, and the attacker will not able to crack it even with the use of frequency statistics. So one of the such method can be used using affine cipher as well, and can be used using vectors as well, right? So using vectors, the function almost remains as a affine cipher, where it becomes afx is equal to ax plus b, where x is a vector, a is a matrix, and b is also a matrix, also a vector. Okay, and here the only restriction is that the determinant of a has to be co-prime to n, where n is the number of letters in the crypto system. Okay, so what we do here, why we need determinant of a to be co-prime, to get the inverse of a, right? So the deciphering function would be a inverse x or a inverse y minus b. This a inverse exists in modulo n only if determinant of a is co-prime to n, otherwise it will not exist. Okay. Okay, so in this process, what we do, suppose I want to send a message doodle now. Again. Already I have sent in single letter enciphering affine cipher, right? The doodle becomes WZZWK, the B. Here you can say WW becomes WZZLOS. Here, the doodle will just block two blocks. I'll use digraphs. So I'll use DO, OD, and LE as 3 blocks. And each block will be represented by 3 vectors. So DO will be represented by 415. I'm using the general notation. A is 1, B is 2, C is 3, D is 4, so on. OD will be 15.4, LE is B 12.5. And I can take any matrix A whose determinant is co-prime to 26. So this matrix, if you check what is the determinant, 33 minus 2 is 31, and 31 is co-prime to 26, obviously. Right? So therefore the inverse exists. Then deciphering would be just simply taking the function f of DO. F of DO would be, if I use this matrix A3210 multiplied with 415 and plus 1, 2, it will be 1715, which will be nothing but QO. And f of OD would be 29, which is nothing but BE, and f of LE would be 2117 and UQ. So that means the Dougal will send to 2 block unit Q, O, B, I, U, Q, right? So now here you can note D and E actually go to the same letters, Q and E, right, in diagram. Similarly, O's, there are 2 O's and 2 O's goes to different letters. So that means in digraph, same letters may not go to the same letters. A different letter may go to the same letter, because the function, the bisection that we talk about in enciphering actually send digraphs to letters, right? So the digraphs are only considered as one element of the plain text, not the unit single letters. Okay, so that's one notice. But here again, there is problem is that with the same problem, like if I know the enciphering function, always I can crack the system by getting the deciphering function by taking the inverse of A, which is always possible to get. And second is statistical analysis, but the statistical analysis will fail if we take blocks bigger than 3, right, which are quite difficult to break it. But in that way, we need to check the feasibility of the computer as a computationally feasible computer. So that's how one can see that Hill cipher actually avoids some bad features, like same letter encrypted to the same way in a affine cipher, but here it encrypted in a different letter. And frequency analysis of letters, if one uses blocks of bigger than 3. But it has problem in the sense that if one knows the encryption function, it becomes one will obviously know the decryption function as well. These are equivalent. And this is the main drawback of any private key crypto system. Even though keys are kept secret, if one knows the encryption function, decryption function. Okay, so therefore the problem that I started with in encrypting the credit card, that is not feasible by using the public key crypto system. Even one use, ultimately, if I want to send, if the merchant tells me the system, ultimately I'll get to know about the whole crypto systems. So obviously I get the deciphering function. So I can crack for other credit card as well if I get a deciphered credit card number in that system, right? So that is a drawback. But there is one modification that can be done by taking different keys for different customers. But that problem is again quite time consuming, right? And also it will be more costlier as well. Okay, and moreover, there are only finitely many such possibilities of keys in n letter. It will be n square, at most n square, right? So therefore, the public private key crypto systems are not so suitable in day-to-day life nowadays, where the security is so much essential. So therefore, people use the public key crypto systems. So that's why I've written here the credit card problem. It will not be easy to using the cryptography system. But if one can get a cryptographic system or crypto system where the merchant tells you that how to encode or how to encrypt the credit card number, but still you will not able to decode it, right? Suppose I'm sending the encoding credit card number, but even though I know the encoding function or encoding process, I'll not able to decode it, right? Without the help of some information which are with only the merchant. Okay, so that is the main motivation of public crypto system. And the public key crypto system is first introduced by Diffie-Hellman in 1976. He generally used it to exchange keys. Like even if you see the private key crypto systems, this A and B, these are keys, right? So the key is supposed to be well agreed before. That means this should be agreed through a secure channel. That means two persons needs to meet to get the confirmation that they will use these keys. And each time they want to send the keys, ultimately they need to meet or they need to use a secure channel. But secure channel, except meeting, it is quite difficult to get a secure channel, right? So that is one, again, drawback of public key crypto system or private key crypto system. So therefore, Diffie-Hellman actually gave an idea, even though there is no secure channel or there is no face-to-face meeting, still one can send these keys at any time through a insecure channel as well, and the attacker will not able to get the keys as well, right? That is Diffie-Hellman crypto system, Diffie-Hellman key exchange, and that is later on used by Elgamal to construct a crypto system, about which I'll discuss at the end, right? The Diffie-Hellman algorithm is generally used in Elgamal crypto system. So the main motivation of public key crypto system is that if someone knows only the enciphering function, will not able to get the deciphering function. That means enciphering keys cannot be used to find the deciphering keys. That's what the motivation of public key crypto system, which is the main drawback of private key crypto system. And in public key crypto system, the basic thing that one needs to use is the trapdoor function. So what is a trapdoor function? Trapdoor function is a function which is easy to compute. Easy to compute, maybe by hand or maybe using computer, but finding inverse is very hard to compute, right? And that's where the prime numbers plays the role and the composite number factorization plays the role. Okay, and those kind of ideas are used here. So if I go to the first crypto system, that is first crypto system that is used by human is the RSA crypto system. The RSA crypto system named after the three Persson, Ron Rivest, Adil Samir, and Leonard Edelman, who discovered it actually in 1977. Even the first public key exchange was done by Hefei-Hellman, but the crypto system was first introduced by Rivest, Samir, and Edelman in 1977. The RSA crypto system based on the assumption that a large integer, large positive integer, is not computationally feasible to factor it. That means if you give a large positive integer, it is quite difficult to factorize it. Actually, computationally impossible to factor it, right? If somebody can find an algorithm to factorize a large prime number in a smaller time, or in a less time, or with using lesser computation, then the RSA crypto system will not work anymore. Okay, so this is the main base of RSA crypto. So far, this is working on this, because the crypto analysis people are not able to get the algorithm to find a large prime number computationally feasible, factorization feasible. Okay. So what is done here in the RSA crypto, the main algorithm is simple in the sense that just take two large prime numbers, P and Q. Okay, so any two prime numbers P and Q, and this P and Q are taken larger so that the number n, which is product of these two large prime numbers, become very large, so that the factorization is not possible computationally. Okay, and the computation, how you determine the computation is actually based on the time complexity, number of bits required to compute, or how much memory a computer uses to do a calculation. And those are actually computation measured. So I'm not going into that. So P and Q are two large numbers. N is the product of two large numbers. So if P and Q are large numbers, then ultimately product will also be large. But if P and Q are not prime numbers, the problem is that they will have smaller factors. So once they have smaller factors, the factorization may be possible, right? So that's why P and Q are taken as prime numbers. So once P and Q are taken, then the phi function is found. Phi function is nothing but the number of co-prime numbers. And using the factorization of n, ultimately I can get phi p, phi q, so which is nothing but p minus 1 into p minus q minus 1. Okay, so unless we can find that also. So then the merchant means the banker will give a number e, which is co-prime to phi n, right? And will tell me to encrypt my credit card number by taking power e to that number, right? Suppose n is the message or the card number, right? If it is a letter, ultimately I can always convert it to a number, right? By using American standard ASCII, or if it is a number itself, then I can get m. So m is a number, then I take the power of m power e, right? So m power a in modulo n, obviously I'll take the modulo n. N is a very large number, so I can take modulo n. So then I'll send in the message m power e, right? And the numbers e and n will be known to everyone. Known to everyone means everybody will know it. Everybody in the sense that even the attacker, even the sender, everyone, you'll publicly make it available. Okay, but other information will not make it. Phi n, you will not make it available. Neither to the sender, neither to the attacker, or no way. Only n and e will make it available, but other information like phi n will not make it available, right? And that is the main thing. Phi n pq. If one do not know phi n pq, ultimately will not able to get n. Okay? So m power e will be sent. Then the merchant will receive m power e. Then what the merchant will do to get the original message is that since e is a coprime to phi n, correct? So one can use the Euclidean algorithm to express 1 as a linear combination of e and phi n, right? So once you get that, ultimately I can take modulo phi n here. So ultimately I'll get x is congruent to 1 mod 1, right? So thus, if I need to get m, ultimately I take power x. X means this x, which I have got using the Euclidean algorithm. So if I take r power x in mod n, ultimately I'll get m. Because you can see m can be written as m power 1, m power phi n minus y. Because in Euler's theorem, you can see that any number power to phi n is always congruent to 1, right? So this will be equal to 1 actually. M power phi n minus 1 is 1, so only left out m. Now m1 minus phi 1 m is nothing but xc, and xc is congruent to always 1 mod phi n, so ultimately it will be r power x mod n, right? Now in this system you can note that knowing E and N will not allow you to get phi n, because to get phi n one needs to know P and Q, and to get P and Q ultimately one needs to factorize this n, even n is known. But already RSA works on the assumption that a large prime number is not possible to factorize computationally. So therefore, even though n is known, P and Q are not known, right? So if P and Q are not known, ultimately phi n will be not known. So therefore, one will not able to get this x. So once one will not get this x, ultimately will not able to get the original message which is sent out by the sender or the customer, right? So I'll just give an example here. Now, before that, how we basically, the standard information, how we send letters to numbers. For a text with K letters, we generally use American Standard Code for Information Exchange. These are already available. M1 up to MK. A single letter M, and N is 26. That means there are 26 letters, 26 numbers given by different ASC values. Then the message will be written as an expansion in the base 256. It is a base, right? So it is a K digit number in the base 256. If I write 10 in place of 10, it will be a km digit number with K base, 10 base. It is 256 base. That's what. Because here I have 256 values available in ASCII system. So when decoding, again we'll receive M and again expand it like this to get this M0, M1, M2, MK. And once I get M1, M2, these will represent some letters using this SCII, and then we'll get the original message as well. So I'll do an example. In this example, I just choose P to be 23. Obviously, P and Q I'm taking smaller numbers, right? Otherwise, it is quite difficult to do the computation. But for computer use, generally larger primes are used. P23, Q20 is 37, then N will be 851, which is obviously easy to factorize. But if P and Q are larger, it will not be possible. Then phi N would be nothing but 729. Now, if one needs C, there are many values of E possible, but I'm taking a simple one, E. Then using Euclidean algorithm, I can find the inverse of 7 in 792, and I can see that 679 is the inverse of 7 in modulo 792. Okay, so that X will be used to get the original message. And since one does not know this P, Q, and phi n will not able to get this X. That means one does not know the 729. So once one does not know 729, ultimately he cannot use the Euclidean algorithm to get 679. So in this process, suppose someone wants to send the message yes. Then by ASCII codes, Y level as 89, E level as 69, and S level as 89. Then the yes message will be labeled as the three-digit number in the base 256, which will be 5457241. Okay, so it is expansion in the base 256. So since this M 5457241 is bigger than the number available N 851 is the product of the two numbers, we just take expansion of that number in the base 851. Okay, because we are working in modulo N, so the numbers has to be in modulo inside modulo N. So modulo N will contain 0 up 1 up to 0 up to 850. The coprime numbers to 851, right? Those will give you. Those will have unit, others will not have unit, but I can take 0 to up to 851.50. So in that system, I'll get 629, 844, and 7. These are smaller number than S51. Actually, I want some smaller numbers less than 851 to perform modulo n operations. Then, since I considered E, I take power 7, E to be 7. So I take power 7 to this number 629, 845, 455, and 7. And I get the numbers 581, 788, and 626. So the merchant will receive these numbers and then use the deciphering. Deciphering means they will take power 629, 679 to 118, 788, and 626 to get the original message. Okay, one can try this. But I'm taking another example where I can get the deciphering. Suppose I get the message as 686, 737, 84 in this process, and 1 as well, with the same system. Then I take the power 679, which is the inverse of 7, and I get the values 4541, 451, 450, 405, 599, 824, and 1. Okay. Then these numbers will be sent in the base 851 because in modulo n these were. So this will be 121, 384, 6827, 29. And to recover this message, that means the merchant will get this message, this number, and he will expand in the base of the values of ASCII. And it will be given 77, 65, 85. It is 256 power 2, and this is 256 power 3. Okay, 72. So the numbers that I got is 77, 65, 85, and 72. And 77 represent M, 65 M, 85 T, and 72 H. Okay, and we can say that these letters actually form math. Okay, so knowing only E will not be suffixed to get the original message. One needs to get X, which can be obtained only if one knows phi. Okay, so therefore the RSA in that sense is such that E and N are public keys and phi, P, Q are private keys in the RSA crypto system. Okay, so one day the one find an algorithm to factorize the composite numbers, the RSA crypto system will not work from that day. Okay. Okay. So the next crypto system I'll talk about is the Algol crypto system. So already I told you that the Algol crypto system is based on the discrete logarithm problem, which was introduced by Diffie-Hellman in the KXS program. What is discrete logarithm problem? This is also one-way function like factorization of prime numbers. So if Z is a primitive root in GP and H is any non-zero element, right? So since Z is a denominator, I can take the all powers and I can keep on doing that. So I can see what are the possible numbers I can get. So obviously at some point I'll get H, right? So this, if Z is known and X is known, it is always easy to get H in modulo P. But if somebody knows H and Z, then it is not computationally easy to get X in modulo P. So this is the base of Algol crypto system. And the problem is to finding this exponent X such that Z and H are known. But this X can be found if we work it with real line. Because in real line, the logarithm is well known. What is X? X is log of H base Z. In real line, we already know the logarithm table, so we can find it. But in mod P or any groups, these logarithms are not so well defined, right? So therefore, finding X is not so easy if P is very large. P is very large means GP. The GP is very large. It will have more elements because taking powers of G one by one is always time consuming, and it may not be possible if P is a very large prime number to find all the powers of Z. Okay, so that's what. If one can get all powers of X in a time computationally, ultimately this Algol crypto system will not work from that day as well. or even if a logarithm can be defined for a groups, finite groups, or GP will define so that the indexes or exponent can be obtained, then the algorithmic crypto system will not work. So therefore, the algorithmic crypto system basically relies on the fact that computing power z power x mod p is always easy, but difficult to find this x knowing z and z power x mod p. Okay, that means if you know z and z power x, then x may not be computationally easy to find in modulo p if p is a large prime number. That's what the base of LGML crypto system. So what is this crypto system states here? Simple. The Martian chooses a sufficiently large prime number. This is because so that one cannot exhaustively get all the powers of z, right? Because if the large prime number, GP will contain many elements, right? So one GP contain many elements, all powers of G will have, we need to find more powers of Z, which may not be computationally feasible to obtain. So therefore we take a large prime number and a primitive element Z, okay? And we'll make both, we'll make G to be public. We'll not make P to be public, but G to be public, okay? So Z will be known to everyone. Then the merchant choose a number A, which is co-prime to P obviously, and compute the Z power A. Okay, so once Z power A is computed, he will make this also available to all. That means the merchant will make available P, which is a large prime number, G, which is the generator of GP or primitive element of GP, and G power A. But knowing all this, one will not able to get A because of the discrete logarithm problem, right? So now he will tell, the merchant will tell you, because P, G, Z power A will be known to all. So he'll tell his customer, all customers, suppose to send a credit card, his credit card number, and the credit card number is M, because it is a number, obviously we'll convert it to number by ASCII number if that is there. So then we'll ask to choose a number B, any number, there is no problem with that B, and find the power G power B and M into G power AB. How G power AB will be obtained? Because G power A is already known and B is chosen by the customer. So obviously G power A whole power B can be obtained, right? So these powers always can be obtained. So G power B and M G power AB will be computed by each customer and sent to the merchant. Now the merchant will receive two things. One, G power B and M G A power B, and already with him A is there. A is not known to anyone but only to the merchant, right? And A also cannot be obtained from this well-known things P, G, and G power A because of this logarithm problem. So then what the merchant will do to get the original message is that he will find G power minus AB. How G power A power minus AB can be obtained? Because since the customers send G power B, Z power B power BP minus A minus A, he will obtain. Why P minus A minus A? Because I am going to the positive integers, and one can say that G power B power P minus 1 is actually 1 mod P, because of the what I can say is Hermat's last theorem, Little theorem, Hermat's Little theorem. So therefore, to make it positive, I'm letting P minus A minus 1, P minus A. So taking from here, I can get G power minus AB, because A is known to the merchant and B will be sent by the customer. So G power minus AB can be obtained from GP. And then to compute M, simply I'll multiply this R, which is basically send the encrypted message or credit card number with the Z power minus AB, because M would be nothing but M G power minus AB, G power minus AB, which will be nothing but R into G power minus AB, right? Because R is already given by the customer to the merchant, and G power minus AB is obtained by the merchant using the information sent by the customer and the information that is with him. Okay. So here again, Diffie-Hellman, the discrete logarithm problem is the base of the LGML crypto systems. Okay. And the only thing, the larger prime number is also one of the problem. Then one need to check, because primality is not easy to check. Larger prime number giving any number you're giving, you cannot say it is a prime number or not. So sometimes it may be, we may use some algorithm like you can say the probabilistic algorithm to have a higher probability that a larger prime number is a prime. Okay, then this should work. So for example, if I give an example here, E is 29, obviously small I am taking for my computation, Z is 14, then I can take a positive integer A. Okay, so if then G power A will be known to the merchant only. So is 27 obviously. So 14 power 17 is 12, right? And suppose I want to send a message again, yes, using the Algamail crypto system using this, then yes alphabet will be corresponding to 25, B and 19. Okay. Then the person will choose a positive integer. The customer will choose a positive integer B, any positive integer, there is no condition on that. And send us the values, G power B, send to the merchant actually, G power B for every number. Then M means for everyone, 25 into 12 power 10, 5 into 12 power 10, and 19 into 12 power 10, mod 29. And these values will be sent. These values will be sent to the merchant, 13, 4, 24, and 10. 13 is basically Z power B, but B is not known to merchant as well. Only Z power B is known. So then he will compute Z power B minus A, because A is already known 7. So minus A means it is 21, because 29 minus 7, sorry, I missed it. It is 20, P minus 1, sorry. P minus 1 minus A, 28 minus 7 is 21. 13 minus 21 is mod 28. So now original message can be obtained by multiplying by this 20 with these cipher numbers. So 4 minus 24 into 28, 24 into 28, and 10 into 28 in modulo 29. And then we get the numbers 25, 5, and 19, which are actually original numbering of the message yes. So ultimately it will give you yes. Okay. So the whole crypto systems, if you look at, are based on some one-way functions. If these one-way functions are known, one can construct a one-way function, trapdoor function, which are not computationally feasible to find the inverse function, like the discrete log problem or the factorization of prime numbers or factorization of integers. Then one can always construct a crypto system easily. And also there is a possibility that one day these crypto systems will not work anymore, right? Because one day someone may find the algorithm where the what I can say is the factorization is possible for a larger integer, and also the discrete logarithm problem is also solvable. There are many such one-way function like NAPSEP problem, right? So that is also used for some crypto systems. So there are many one-way functions there. So I'm just briefing two which uses a completely number theory. NAPSEP problem uses some kind of linear algebra as well. So I'm not going into that here. So that's what. So these are the two crypto systems which completely based on number theory I have discussed here. This is another problem that I have done. I think the same kind of thing. If I want to send a message M200132, the same process can be done actually. There is nothing different compared to the previous problem. Okay? Using the Algamail. The textbooks references, if one wants to go through a basic course on number theory and cryptography, then they can go the elementary number theory book by Burton and Neil Cobley's book as well. It's a fundamental book, these are basically. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the very nice talk. So we have some questions from the audience, and I also request if there are other questions to write in the chat. So the first question was, it was asked when you were explaining public and private key crypto system, and could you repeat once again the difference between private and public key? So you have explained this, but if you can explain it again, somebody has found.
Yeah, so in private is actually a crypto system where there's only one key. First of all, it is only one key. Like if I say a fine cipher, it is AX plus B, A comma B is the key. But in public key crypto system, there is two kinds of key. One is public key, another is private key. That is the first difference that one can say. Second difference, in private key crypto system, the keys is supposed to be known by the sender, right? The secret key. But in public key crypto system, the sender supposed to know only the public key, which is known to the all people, but the private key will be only with the recipient or the merchant who is supposed to get the message. That is the second. Third is that in private key crypto system, if one knows the enciphering function, that means if one knows the keys or enciphering function, automatically get the deciphering function as well. So that means he will have the complete knowledge of the system, even though one should not get the whole information except the owner of the system. But in public key crypto system, even if one knows the enciphering function or enciphering keys, will not able to get the deciphering function or deciphering key. Okay, so these three are the main differences of private and public key crypto system. And in private key systems is symmetric because deciphering function is same as deciphering function, but in publicly this is not quite. These are quite different. They're quite, so this is called asymmetric crypto system as well. Hope you get the answer.
Then Sharmila Dayal is asking, what are the methods for generating secret key apart from using number theoretic methods or using neural networks?
There are many methods used to find secret keys, right? Except number theory, I do not know much, if I frankly speak.
Okay.
Because I basically studied the number theory part in cryptography that is used here, in that sense.
Parthopratim Borua is asking about the security. So which type of number theory is used for the security in cryptography?
Yeah, that's what I have told already. If you look at private key crypto system, these are quite difficult to check the security, right? The security will increase only if different enciphering function are used for different functions, different customers, which is actually always time consuming as well as in terms of budget also it is very difficult for huge, right? But in public key crypto system, you can see that this is completely based on number theory. Based on number theory is that if you look at the RSA crypto system, it completely relies on the fact that a large integer cannot be factorized. If one can factorize it, ultimately the RSA crypto system will not work. So that means the complete RSA crypto system is based on the factorization of integers, right? If he can get an algorithm to get a factorization of any integer, large integer, then the RSA system will not work anymore. But until that is done, the crypto system will work. Similarly, discrete logarithm problem is also finding the power in modulo, right? And this is also in modulo is a number theory. So in number theory, basically finding powers is not easy in higher prime modulo. That's why we take P's to be a large prime number. And there are always different ways to check the primality or factorization, but those are not so computationally exact in the sense that we can only say that a number is prime up to some probability if it is a large prime number, but not exactly we can say it is a prime number or less, right? So those are actually numerical aspect that one can, these are actually still a problem research areas where cryptography and crypto analysis people keep on doing.
Suraj Lekharu has a question. So is the crypto system which is used in banking sector or telecom sector are similar to each other? If the systems are not similar, then what kind of feature of crypto system makes them different from each other?
Which two?
Banking sector and telecom sector.
They must have used some crypto system, obviously. And obviously that would be obviously some public key. More recently, actually at the moment, if I say modern cryptography, elliptic curve cryptography is used mostly actually, because it is more secure comparatively compared to RSA crypto system, Diffie-Hellman crypto system, all this crypto system. So I don't know what is the crypto system they use, but they must have used some crypto system. But I can say that the elliptic crypto system is the most secure crypto system at the moment that people use.
Bishal Patwari is asking, is the barcode written behind books or any product based on number theory? Is there any security-based system for these barcodes?
Obviously, those are security for regions only. You can check in there is always a, if you go to a shopping mall, then they scan the barcode, right? So scanning the barcode, they automatically get the price of that item. So there is always a crypto system used between, or a crypto system used between this barcode and the description of these items. There is always, that is there always.
Dhiraj Singh is asking how to get an idea to define a new public key crypto system using some known fact of algebra.
If I know that, ultimately I can construct a new crypto system. So it is basically, you need to study that one needs to computationally verify that if you give a one-way function, and that means one way of computing, it is not feasible to find the inverse of that in some way computationally.
Mohammad Sadukar Rahman is asking, is there any mathematical logic behind the 12-digit Aadhaar number?
Well, what is that? What is the question?
Number. So is there any mathematical logic behind the Aadhaar number, Aadhaar card number?
I guess there is, because they must have used it, because the Aadhaar number cannot be, if you have Aadhaar number, others cannot use the Aadhaar number, right? And there is always a security attached to it. And the security must be, and I think some years back, we had a news that the Aadhaar information has been leaked. So those are always some security issues are there basically, but these are always some crypto system used to make the Aadhaar numbers, because the Aadhaar number contain all details of a person, like fingerprint, our eye scan. So there is always a crypto system to save all those data.
So there is a question, but I don't know if it means something. So it's Ajay Gupta is asking, can you please explain the concept behind math, M-A-T-H in capital math number? So I think it was one of the examples that you gave.
Yeah, I have done an example just to explain the process.
Okay. So there is one more question now. It's a general question. So how can a mathematics student get this knowledge about crypto system, as this topic is not in the MSc course, or is there any book or course that?
Obviously, there are many mathematics. If one, obviously, already at the introduction, B.K. Sharma sir has told that mathematics is nothing but interest. If you have interest in something, ultimately the course curriculum will not barrier to it. Whether a topic is in the course curriculum or not, it should not bother you. So if you are interested, if you have the basic knowledge of number theory, ultimately one always can go to the cryptographic or crypto analysis. There is always a possibility. But in certain cases, like there are certain areas of number theory, those actually use the permutation polynomials, where the people study using number theoretical aspects. But obviously these are not in the curriculum, but one can study themselves if one is interested.
Subrat Parida is asking, can we predict the future of prime numbers such as any formula by which we can predict it in higher digits through crypto system? So question is not so clear, but I think he's asking if you can predict prime numbers using crypto systems.
Till now it is not there. Actually prime numbers are quite fascinating. There are many open problems related to prime numbers as well, in numerical way. And these are not completely well understood yet. And so it's quite difficult to get knowledge about the prime numbers. right? Even though there are many properties are known, but still, even though the prime numbers looks quite simple, but these are quite like mysterious thing in number theory aspect. So I don't know whether there is any generating function for prime numbers. I don't think there is.
So there is a question from Arvind Pandey, which is just what is fundamental number, if it means anything to you?
Fundamental number.
Yeah. So he asked this twice, but I don't know. I mean, Arvind, if you can just explain a bit more what you want to ask.
I don't know what is fundamental number is.
So Nomi Begum is asking if you can say a little bit more about probability algorithms in crypto system.
Probability algorithm. Okay, so there are actually some definite ways. Definite ways in the sense that Wilson's theorem, most of you know, I guess. If P is a prime, if P is prime, if and only P minus 1 factorial is congruent to minus 1 mod P. So this will definitely answer about the prime numbers. But if you look at the Euler's, Fermat's last little theorem, it says that a power P minus 1 is congruent to 1 mod P if P is a prime and P does not divide A. Correct? So there are some composite numbers also which satisfy the same property. Right? If P is a prime, a power P minus 1 is congruent to 1 mod P. But there are certain composite numbers which also satisfy the same property. Suppose n is a composite number, a power P n minus 1 is congruent to 1 mod n for some prime composite numbers. So that means this is not a characterization of the prime numbers, right? But, and these composite numbers are called pseudo primes. These are not prime, but satisfy certain properties similar to the prime numbers. These are called pseudo primes. So the pseudo primes are actually used to check the primality, whether a number is prime to some order or some probability or not. So what is done actually, like suppose I want to check a number is a prime or not. I find that I try to check the Euler's theorem. Fermat's last theorem, Fermat's little theorem. I try to check it. If it is satisfied, there are two things. It can be prime. It may not be prime. Right? Either it is a prime or pseudo prime. So there is a probability, half probability. Correct? For AA. Suppose now I sense this A for a different number, B1. So again I check for the B1. Suppose for B1 also, it satisfies the same. So that means the probability is again half. So half into half, it becomes 1 by 4. So that's how the probability that it is not composite becomes smaller. So if you keep on doing the same process n times, the probability that it is not a composite number becomes 1 by 2 power n. But at some point, if it does not satisfy the Fermat's little theorem, a power n minus 1 is congruent to 1 mod n, so ultimately you can directly say that it is not a prime number, it has to be a composite number if it does not satisfy. But if it satisfies, there are half probability. So that is one of the probabilities ways. There are many probability aspect to use, is used to find the in primality testing actually.
So this is a question I think we have already addressed this in the talk, but I'll still say it. So if a sender sends an encrypted message to a receiver and if a third party has knowledge about encryption, so is it possible that the third party can decode it?
In public private key crypto system, it's always possible. Mm-hmm. But in public key crypto system, it is not always possible. He needs to have some other information, secret information. One's supposed to know some secret information to get the original message.
So this is one more general question. Somebody is asking that she wants to do research in cryptography. So if you can suggest some books which could get her started.
There are many standard books on cryptography actually. The basic, if you want to start with, to have an idea what the crypto systems and number theory are related, you can start with the Kabli's book that is given in the reference. Or there are many books like I can say Rosen. I've used Rosen, some Rosen. I forgot the name. There is a Rosen's book, Washington's books. There are many books on cryptography.
So Aditya is asking, can cryptography be integrated with something like game theory to build a big data security model?
I guess there can be, but I don't have knowledge about that.
Anubrata is asking, if suppose we know a formula for prime numbers in some form, then what is its impact on cryptography?
It will have big impact actually. One thing, if you have a formula for the prime numbers, ultimately you can tell all the prime numbers, right? So that means one way defining large prime numbers becomes easier. That is the first thing. And second thing, when you know all the prime numbers, so obviously factorization will also be easier to do, because one only needs to check the composite or the factorization with the help of those prime numbers only. It becomes easier, the factorization. So once the factorization is easier, ultimately RSA crypto system will not work at all. So there are always impact on the prime numbers on certain crypto systems.
So at this moment, we don't have any more questions. So I now want to ask if Dr. Mohanto wants to say something. Otherwise, we can close the session.
I can stop sharing the screen, right? Now?
Yes, yes.
Thank you, Gautam, for a very beautiful topic with us. Basically, this is a very important topic in this particular time. And yes, some participant has already seen the syllabus also. When these kind of things should be included. And I think to you for energetic and topic.
So his network seems to be a bit of a problem, but I guess he's trying to thank you. So thank you from my side as well for the very nice talk, and also for giving us your valuable time.
Thank
Not
you
only
for
with the
giving me the
talk,
opportunity.
answering all the questions, and also apologies that you had to do this again today because of the problem yesterday.
Not an issue.
Thank you so much.
Okay. So I can leave, right?
Yes, yes.